The following passage is from the end of the story of Cadmus in Ovid's Metamorphoses, when Cadmus requests to be transformed into a serpent to end the curse put on him by the god Mars. If this is what the gods are angry over, may I become a serpent, with a body stretched full length forward. Even as he spoke, he stretched out full length forward, felt his skin harden and scales increase, and mottled markings sprinkle his blackening body. He fell forward, crawled on his belly. He cried, "Come nearer, my poor dear wife, while there is something left for you to come to." He wanted to say more, but found his tongue suddenly forked. Instead of words, a hissing spoke his lament. "O Cadmus, unhappy man," she cried, "why not transform me also, gods of heaven, into another serpent?" He licked her face, glided between her breasts, twined around her neck, while all who stood there watching shook in horror. And suddenly there were only two serpents there, entwined about each other, and gliding, after a while, to hiding places in the dark woods. I'm not like a snake guy. Until recently, I didn't think about snakes much. Symbolically, snakes are a shorthand for evil and darkness and sin and rebellion. In other words, snakes are pretty cool. But I think that symbolism is so common, it feels generic rather than special. Think of how everyone who has tattoos has at least one snake tattoo. Something that is meant to signal fear or danger feels cliché and goofy. But recently, really a few years ago at this point, I started seeing snakes in places that didn't make sense. Snakes I hadn't noticed before. I live in New York, where every new trash can in the city has an emblem with a caduceus symbol. Two snakes intertwined around a staff with angel wings. Every sanitation truck also has a big caduceus on both sides. Nearly every medical office, hospital, pharmacy, and health-related organization has a snake or two in their logo. Snakes are on cars, fashion brands, any book cover that has anything to do with sin or evil or religion. Sometimes the connection is clear when the snake is associated with fear, danger, or sin. In many cases, it seems random. I started noticing snakes everywhere after reading the book Signs and Symbols by the influential Swiss typeface designer Adrian Frutiger, where he writes, "The snake or serpent is the easiest form of life to draw. A crooked line alone is enough to represent the creature." That struck me as pretty funny the first time I read it and thought about snake symbols, but he then continues, "Naturally, there are also many deeper reasons for the prominence of the serpent symbol than mere mechanical ease of drawing. The serpent figure can be seen as a symbolic archetype, incontrovertibly present in the human subconscious." That struck me as a massive reversal of theory from one paragraph to the next. Frutiger then elaborates on the meaning of the symbol. The most important association is probably fear of its deadly bite. Fear of a being that can bring death, hidden in the earth, in grass, in foliage, and in piles of rocks. Confronting humankind with this primitive fear, the serpent has been given a leading place in the symbolization of matters of life and death in many different cultures. The two opposed explanations make sense in the context of Frutiger's understanding of human consciousness developing through oppositions. In the chapter Signs of Dualism, he writes, "Through all of humans' feelings, thoughts, and efforts to understand themselves and their environment, there runs the constant theme of coming to terms with duality. Consciousness of life and death, here and hereafter, good and evil, mind and matter, and all other concepts born of opposition has led to a great variety of dogmas, worldviews, religions, and philosophies. I'm generally suspicious of dualities and dichotomies. While it's probably the case that some combination of easy to draw and subconscious archetypal fear is at play, or something in between those extremes, it's fun to approach this as an either-or duality. I've been calling the snakes are easy to draw side of the argument snake formalism, the claim that snakes are prevalent symbols in human history across geography, time, and culture because they are easy to draw and form into any shape. As Frutiger writes, the serpent's body in its linear form allows the artist to associate the figurative most closely with the abstract. Frutiger continues to describe a series of symbols related to snakes. They are associated with fear, as quoted above, and life and death, represented by shedding and regrowing their skin. Snakes have a figurative association with the phallus. A circular serpent eating its own tail, or Ouroboros, symbolizes rebirth and the eternal recurrence concept. The snake is used as a symbol for the medical profession in both the aforementioned caduceus symbol, or the winged staff of Mercury, and the rod of Asclepius, the god of healing. The caduceus shape may have been inspired by a symbol combining a crescent, moon, and sun, which were also associated with the snake because they disappear and reappear like snakes who seem to disappear into the earth. Snakes are depicted wrapping around the earth or an egg, representing the cosmic embrace or creation of all life. Frutiger's examples aren't exhaustive, but they give a good picture of the variety of meanings found in snake symbolism. This multiplicity of meanings favors the side of snake formalism. If there is an archetypal, subconscious relationship between humans and snakes, I would expect that relationship to be universal. And if it's universal, I would expect the meanings of these symbols to be consistent. But that's far from the case. Not only are there many different meanings, many are seemingly directly opposed to one another. Some snake symbols stand for wisdom and health, while others represent evil and death. But we'll find those meanings may be more connected than they seem at first. I've been calling the other side of the argument snake naturalism, in the sense of human nature or a natural, subconscious, or innate relationship to snake symbolism. Snake naturalism seems more aligned with scholars who have studied the topic, who tend to conclude there's some metaphysical, psychological, or evolutionary connection between Homo sapiens and Serpentes. It is more difficult to substantiate, but it feels like a deeper connection is necessary to explain the haunting universality of snake symbolism. This is a specific question about snake symbols, but it implies a more general question about symbolism. Why and how we find so much meaning in the repetition of simple forms. It seems some explanation other than form and coincidence is necessary to explain the uncanny similarities of symbols across human culture. We can start building some background on this question by acknowledging that for snake naturalism to be true, some form of innate human knowledge must exist. Without it, humans can't be born knowing the snake symbol. Frutiger touches on this question earlier in the book, writing, "The idea that certain figures are anchored deep in our subconscious from birth as inherited archetypes with a common symbolic interpretation should also be mentioned here. Does a kitten have a mental picture of mouse before it sees one for the first time? Or does a child recognize fire as danger before it has been burned? This gives rise to a fundamental question, whether a pictorial notion can be inborn or whether it must first be experienced in order to enter the subconscious as a memory." The debate over the existence of innate knowledge goes back to the origins of philosophy. In his work On the Soul, Aristotle argued that the soul is a material part of the body, and that knowledge is gained only through material experience. Of the mind, he writes, "It is nothing until it has thought. What it thinks must be in it, just as characters may be said to be on a writing tablet, on which as yet nothing actually stands written." Aristotle catalogs the arguments of previous philosophers, including Plato, who believed some concepts based on ideal metaphysical forms were known from birth. In Plato's dialogue Meno, Socrates tells Meno, "For as all nature is akin, and the soul has learned all things, There's no reason why we should not, by remembering but one single thing, discover everything else. It would seem research and learning are wholly recollection. Socrates demonstrates innate knowledge by drawing basic forms in sand to show the principles of math are universal, in a way that reminds me of how Frutiger begins his exploration of symbolism with dots and lines. The argument over innate knowledge continued in the Enlightenment when empiricists like John Locke argued in favor of a blank slate or tabula rasa condition of the human mind. Locke was responding to philosophers like René Descartes, who argued innate knowledge was revealed by empirical learning. In Meditations on First Philosophy, Descartes differentiates between two meanings of nature, one referring to the sense I'm using it in snake naturalism, or as Descartes puts it, by my own particular nature, I understand nothing other than the combination of all the things bestowed on me by God. The other meaning refers to the material world and empirical learning through interactions with nature. Descartes questions whether the material world exists in the first place, and, like Socrates and Plato, thinks all knowledge is ultimately divinely revealed. Locke, on the other hand, in an essay concerning human understanding, questions our ability to know any truth, writing, "He may have reason to suspect that either there is no such thing as truth at all, or that mankind hath no sufficient means to attain a certain knowledge of it." Locke also maintains the existence of God, but denies our access to his knowledge, saying, "He has stamped no original characters on our minds." While we seem to have moved on to a materialist view of the world and left God behind, the debate over innate knowledge continued in disciplines like psychology and anthropology. The psychologist Carl Jung's psychoanalytic theory of the collective unconscious claims people share innate knowledge of universal symbols, or archetypes, as Frutiger refers to. Jung studied mythology and his patients' dreams to find universal symbols. Jung wrote extensively on the serpent symbol, and even identified with the serpent archetype and wore a ring with a serpent engraving. In The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, Jung writes, "More especially, the threat to one's inmost self from dragons and serpents points to the danger of the newly acquired consciousness being swallowed up again by the instinctive psyche, the unconscious. Snake dreams usually occur, therefore, when the conscious mind is deviating from its instinctual basis." Later in that work, in analyzing a patient's dream, he writes, "The snake, as a chthonic and at the same time spiritual being, symbolizes the unconscious." Jung's theory was in part responsible for his dramatic, professional, and personal decoupling with his mentor Sigmund Freud, who criticized Jung's interest in what Freud called the occult. Freud thought people are born with instincts or drives, but our personalities are formed by experience. So he appears to be on the side of tabula rasa, if we're keeping score. Jung, on the other hand, thought Freud was too narrowly focused on the libido. So, are snakes, based on their formal similarity, simply phallic symbols? Or are they a symbol of our unconscious mind? Trick question, of course, they are both. In anthropology, structuralism offers an explanation that at times sounds like Jung, but does not rely on a set of universal archetypes or collective unconscious. In Structural Anthropology, Claude Lévi-Strauss writes, "The unconscious, on the other hand, is always empty, or more accurately, it is as alien to mental images as is the stomach to the foods which pass through it." Structuralism instead argues shared myths and symbols are the product of structural relationships between groups of people in their environment, and the symbolic function, like language, works the same in all humans but produces different content. This is, in a way, our combination of snake formalism and snake naturalism. The snake as a form is a ready medium for our universal symbolic function. Of course, if humans are born with some innate knowledge, it isn't necessarily snake related, but the snake naturalism theory does require some innate knowledge. Likewise, snake formalism is not necessarily incompatible with innate knowledge, but a lack of innate knowledge would seem to exclude the possibility of snake naturalism, making snake formalism a stronger theory. For a while now, I've been exploring these ideas and snake symbolism across art, literature, and culture. What started as a random curiosity began to feel like a key to something about the human condition. And when I started thinking phrases like a key to the human condition, I thought maybe I was losing it. But then I just keep seeing snakes everywhere. So I feel like there must be something there. Is it possible that snakes are so popular and universal because they're just easy to draw? Or is there something about human nature that ties us to the serpent? Or, like Cadmus and his wife, are the theories of snake formalism and snake naturalism intertwined?